The NFL draft is 2 weeks from tonight. Let's talk about some risers in the NFL draft. We also want to discuss the future of Dolphins receiver Tyreek Hill, who continues to make headlines this offseason. NFL Spotlight starts now. Welcome in. It is the Thursday, April 10 edition of the NFL Spotlight Show. I am your host, Ari Meirov. Just 2 weeks away from the NFL draft. All the chatter, all the rumors, all the rumblings. It is all over the place. In my world, it is lying season. Everyone has a different thing to say. Some people are saying the truth. Most people are just making up stuff to throw you off. But we're going to try to get you all the facts here on the show. And a lot of different things are out there. You're reading a lot of it. We're going to try to tell you some of the guys who are actually hot in NFL circles, and you could be hearing their names earlier than usual here on the show. Let me bring in my good friend Ben Allen. Ben, what is going on? It's great to see you. How's everything going?
Things are going well. Yeah, let's go ahead and start right where you were just talking about the rising draft prospects. We're 2 weeks away from the draft, first round. We're going to see a lot of the names that we've been seeing in these mock drafts end up going. That's why we do these mock drafts, so we become familiar with those top guys. But I think this exercise here will be good to give you a range of guys that you may have not necessarily heard their names as often, but they're being talked about in these draft rooms, and they're going to be being discussed in these war rooms night of the draft. And these things have already been taking place. Like you said, some of it's fake, some of it's real. But can you give us 5 guys that are climbing boards and that you've been hearing their names more and more throughout these conversations you've had?
Yeah, so I like asking guys like, whether it's by position or by, guys who are hot, guys you like, guys who are these are my guys I would love to take if I was GM. Like I try to ask those type of questions, very unique type of questions. For me, by the way, I only want to talk to NFL executives and people who are actually in the scouting community for these type of things. A lot of other people, right or wrong, they like talking to agents, and agents only prop up their own guys. A lot of the stuff you see out there, frankly, is from agents. And it's unfortunate because, some of it, they just try to make their guys sound like they're much higher than everybody else. And it's not really what is going on. So the 5 guys I'm giving you here today are guys that teams keep on bringing up. And I kind of went with guys who are, first round guys in the beginning. And as we work our way down, some guys who are day 2 and eventually day 3 guys as well, who might go earlier than maybe you would expect. And I'll start with a name that maybe people have seen much more of, and it's true. UNC running back Omarion Hampton. Now, listen, Ashton Genty, the Boise State running back, he is the number 1 running back in this class, hands down. But it sounds more and more that Hampton has solidified himself as the number 2 running back in this class, which is a very, very deep running back class. And here's the thing. No one really talked about him last year because Drake May got all the attention at UNC. No one really talked much about him this year because of, Ashton Genty being awesome, UNC just being a bad team. And there were so many other great running back storylines in college football, whether it's a, Cam Scadaboo or Ohio State and their run with the 2 running backs that they have. There's a lot of different things going on where the Hampton buzz maybe was not there, but it's definitely picking up. It's definitely real. And this is a guy who led the ACC in rushing in 2023, but what made it amazing is he did it again this past year without Drake May, without really anybody on that team who is a real threat to get the ball. Like everyone on defense knew the ball was going to him, and he was like the only option, but he still set a team record in scrimmage yards with over 2,000 yards this past year. He's built like an NFL back, great combination of speed, size, strength, good pass protector, breaks tackles, really has a little bit of everything. So it would not surprise me at all if he is, first of all, the number 2 running back, yes, but we hear him potentially also in that first half of the first round or somewhere in that top 20 picks once we get to the draft, which again is 2 weeks from tonight. Number 2 on my list here, I'm going to go over to a cornerback, Kentucky cornerback Maxwell Hairston for me. And Travis Hunter, the Colorado receiver corner, is cornerback 1 on basically every board that I ask. But after that, it is all over. And I think the media, most people have Will Johnson out of Michigan as the cornerback too. But I would not rule out Maxwell Harrison being in that conversation as well. He ran a blazing 4.28 at the combine, 39-inch vertical. He's very, very confident, which is what you want out of your cornerbacks. Gets in and out of breaks, plays the ball really well, had 5 interceptions a couple years ago in 2023, missed some time this past year with a shoulder injury, but I've seen some mocks having him out of the first round. I think he gets into the first round, especially in a cornerback class that is not so deep this year when it comes to top talent. Next up, number 3 here on the list, LSU tight end Mason Taylor, the son of Jason Taylor, the Hall of Fame pass rusher from the Dolphins. His uncle is Zach Thomas, the former Hall of Fame linebacker for the Dolphins. So he has the NFL bloodline already in him, just 20 years old, will turn 21 in May. But the most productive tight end in LSU history, 129 receptions, over 1,300 receiving yards. Both are the most for a tight end in that school's history. And this is somebody who has great hands, great burst, polished route runner. And he, for the most part, lined up in the inline at LSU. They did put him out in the slot a little bit, but this is somebody where the knock on him is probably in the blocking department. I think he could get better there. That is probably the one knock on him that you'll hear whenever you talk to scouts. But the two big tight end names in this draft are Tyler Warren and Colston Loveland. And those two guys are top two. No argument about that. They're going to be the first two tight ends in this draft. But I do think Taylor is somebody who has that starter potential, likely goes somewhere in the second round. Somebody mentioned to me, it's not exactly the same, but the 2022 NFL draft, the top two tight ends where everyone were talking about leading up to the draft were Dalton Kincaid and Michael Mayer. No one talked about Sam Laporta. Eventually, he was drafted actually ahead of Michael Mayer, one pick ahead of him. But we saw what Laporta became right away in his rookie year and what he's become in the NFL. People kind of have him where like no one is talking about him. Third tight end in this class, not close to the first two. Those two guys definitely are ahead of him, but somebody who could definitely have the potential in the NFL to be a day one starter for a team. After that, we're going to go to the wide receivers of here. Iowa State wide receiver Jaden Higgins, 6'4", 214 pounds, a true X receiver for the most part, was on the outside for most of his career there this past year in Iowa State. And this is somebody who he moves really well for a guy of his size, like smooth hips, can run the entire route tree. He's a really reliable pass catcher, not many drops, and he's great off the line of scrimmage, like great for somebody of his size. And I've gotten the comps for him as a Nico Collins. One person mentioned Drake London. Like this is somebody who was a former 0-star recruit out of high school, and he just puts his head down and works. And this receiver draft class, not the deepest in the world. The past drafts over the years have been far deeper than this. Trying to figure out where all these guys go, it is all over the place. But a lot of fans for Jaden Higgins, and this is a name, if you're looking for a big bodied guy, I think he's somebody who could sneak in the back end of the first round, if not early round two for him as well. There are some fans of him in the league for sure. And then I'm going to go over here with a guy who is later in the draft. You're not hearing much about him. We mentioned how deep this running back class is, but this is somebody who I've seen fifth round, sixth round, seventh round, day three kind of for him. But he is somebody who I think could definitely make some noise in the NFL. Texas running back Jadon Blue. I mean, the speed for him pops off the screen. But the reason I'm putting him here is when I was asking a bunch of NFL scouts and executives about running backs, I got his name from three different people about like whenever you get three different people mentioning the same person that we're fans of him, we like him, we like what we saw. I feel like I have to put him here. So again, I've seen him in that day three category. It would not surprise me. Maybe just maybe he sneaks into that day two, end of day two, round two, three, round twos or three, excuse me, here in the draft. He's got the patience to let blocks develop, the kind of agility that makes defenders miss in a phone booth, and he's a tough runner after contact. So he's also a legit threat in the passing department. He was the number one among all FBS running backs with 6 receiving touchdowns this past year. The one thing for him was the fumbling. It was a big issue there at Texas, but if that's something that he could clean up, there are some fans around the NFL for him here in the league. So those are my 5 guys. If I was to sprinkle in and cheat over here a 6th guy, I will mention also Washington State wide receiver Kyle Williams. Round two, early round two, end of end of round one could also be a potential spot for him. Not much attention, but looks like as of late, he's been getting more and more buzz as well.
Love to hear it. We're obviously at that time of year where we're just getting hammered so much with the top 10 picks that it's good to be able to go through, find those other guys, and obviously get that insight from the people that actually matter. All right. Before we get out of here today, we got to talk about what's going on in Miami. We got to talk about Tyreek Hill and the continuing drama that's been taking place. On Monday, cops were called to Tyreek Hill's house after a domestic dispute was reported by his mother in law. Upon arriving, the cops determined that no crime had been committed and no arrests were made. The news comes after a tumultuous start to the offseason in which we saw Tyreek Hill announce his desire to leave the Dolphins, which was then backpedaled. And then he started tweeting some more weird stuff. So, regardless of basically what's going on now, it's very fair to say that Tyreek Hill has become a real distraction for the team. And that's just the boiled down, condensed version of it. Do you think that Tyreek is going to be a Miami Dolphins player week one when all this starts? And if they were to say move away from him, how do they get that done?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to get to here. This past season, of course, 17 games, started all 17 of them, but for the first time in a very long time, had under 1,000 receiving yards. So this was not the, typical Tyreek Hill season this past year. He'll mention the wrist injury. There, of course, was before week one, the whole arrest getting into the game, which he should not have happened. There was a lot of things that happened this past year. But since that end of season week 18 game versus the Jets in the locker room saying, get me out of here, and then taking it back, you mentioned all of it, Ben. But this is a very interesting situation because if we all remember last year, Tyreek Hill wanted a new deal from the Dolphins, and he got one. It was not necessarily an extension, it was more of a restructure where they moved some money around. They gave him a raise in 2024. And probably the biggest thing about that deal was in his previous contract, 2025 was not guaranteed. They essentially fully guaranteed 2025. And now he has $27.7 million in guarantees for this year. So previously he did not have that. When he got that contract, I believe it was in August of last year. That was probably the big addition that he had to his contract. I think it was reported as a 3 year, $90 million extension. That's not really what it was. It was a little bit different. Now, the thing over here is the way they structure that deal, it's not, again, an extension. It's something where they can't cut him unless they're able to void the guarantees because of off the field stuff that have happened. Those guarantees are there, and the dead money would be north of $50 million if they did it right now. Even if they did it as a post June 1 cut, it still would be very difficult. Where it could become a possibility here is a trade. And that is a situation where, from a salary cap perspective, there is a way of doing it because I don't want to get into the nitty gritty of how contracts work, but the Dolphins basically put this option bonus in his contract that if they're able to trade him at any point before the start of the season, the guaranteed money that he's owed this year essentially just changes hands to a new team. So they're able to get out of that contract, at least the guarantee portion, if they try to trade him. It's not like those guarantees were officially paid at some point this offseason. It's not a roster bonus. It's none of that. It's something that only triggers to officially get paid once the season starts with that option bonus. He's getting that money, but again, the way it was set up was a very unique way, in a way where the Dolphins kind of knew that this is more of a year to year thing, but they kind of never thought they'll be in this position here in 2025. The question really becomes is if you're a team, why are we trading for Tyreek Hill? Why are we taking on $27.7 million in salary when he has all this stuff going on? This past year was his least productive. Again, there were things going on. Tua was out. There was the wrist injury, which he played through, and all of that. But you get all these other distractions on top of it. You get somebody who, could tweet some stuff, could say some stuff, could have, unfortunately, things happen off the field, whether it's an arrest, whether it is something that gets charged. Again, there was no charges here, but there's things going on over here. And again, he's in his 30s now, so he's on the back end of his career. You could kind of also just question the Dolphins' decision to even do that contract last year when you keep in mind that they did that contract last year and allowed players like a Christian Wilkins and a Robert Hunt to leave in free agency in order to pay him. So you could look at this entire situation as a bit of a mess up by the Dolphins, but releasing him essentially is very difficult on a team that already has a complicated cap situation. If it really gets too much for them, I guess you could do it and just eat it. But I think it would be too much for them. But the only logical thing here, from what I see, at least from the contract, would be a trade. And if there was not much off the field stuff happening here, I do think the Dolphins maybe would have wanted to trade him, considering the way they structured this contract last year. But when you add all the stuff that he did, and you mentioned it, Ben, after the Week 18 game, the tweets, the off the field, the arrest, and all of this, I just don't know how a trade over here is really possible. So I think the only logical situation here is he ends up staying with the Dolphins. If they're able to void some guarantees, I guess you could finagle the way out of it, but I don't know what you're voiding it for right now. So the way I look at this, I think the Dolphins are stuck with him right now for 2025. And come 2026, that is when they could get out of this contract should they want to. But they're in a bit of an interesting situation here. And Tyreek has not been helping himself with the way he's been, I guess, a bit of a distraction this offseason. But that is where things stand from a contractual standpoint with Tyreek Hill.
We'll obviously continue to monitor the situation here every single day on NFL Spotlight. Make sure you guys are subscribed on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, all that good stuff. Hit the thumbs up button, turn on alerts, this, that, and the other. That's all I got for you, Ari.
Yep, that would do it here for our Thursday, April 10 edition of the NFL Spotlight Show. NFL Draft 2 weeks from tonight. We will be back here tomorrow morning to wrap up the week. More NFL talk, more NFL draft talk. It is getting closer and closer, and we will see you all here tomorrow morning.